Are there different agendas for global energy? Is a pleasure again having my friend Ronald Stein. Good afternoon, Ronald Stein.
Arnold, glad to be back. I mean, Armando.
Armando,
I said Arnold.
no problem. Yeah. Let me show the article on the page, the first page of the article. Is this one? No, the article you published recently.
Yes,
Yes, yes.
America Outloud. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Ronald, there are different groups defending different directions on energy. They just seem opposite one of the others.
Right.
Uh, some defend solar and wind, some others natural gas, coal, and oil. Sometimes too emotional, sometimes rational. So who is who in this show?
Well, the policymakers and a lot of the government officials are some of the people setting the policies. I mean, that's the green energy that they're implementing that may be destroying our way of life because they are focusing on wind and solar, which produce electricity. In fact, Armando, if it wasn't for government subsidies, we wouldn't build wind turbines and solar panels, these farms, because they're not a good business investment. They don't work most of the time. And so subsidies are required to get them funded. And that's funded by public dollars. You and me are providing those funds. But the policymakers are setting everything up to wind and solar. But as we mentioned, it's a bad business investment. We need continuous, uninterruptible supplies of electricity. Computers, hospitals, airports, operating rooms. I mean, everything needs continuous electricity, not intermittent electricity. And basically, wind and solar are really just redundant electrical generation systems. They're redundant to the reliable electrical generation we have, be it coal, natural gas, hydro, nuclear. But like you say, the wind and solar, they're just redundant. And they only generate electricity. They only generate occasional electricity. And they can make no products for society. So they're very limited. But, our policymakers, which tend to be mostly people in politics or policies, they're not trained in engineering. They're basically, I want to say they're only from wealthy countries, because wealthy countries have this green agenda. And they're unaware of the engineering reality that without the petrochemicals manufactured from crude oil, the products in our society that didn't exist 200 years ago, they go away. And so the thing that's disappointing is they're unwilling to engage in conversations. Like, I'm all for getting rid of oil, but show me the backup plan, because we have a product-dominated society, and all the products in our house, the hospital, the workplace, they all come from oil. And this conversation comes to an end because there's no communication systems to be built by wind turbines or solar panels.
Yeah, but you identified one side of people, policymakers you mentioned, but the other side, who are people that are defending coal, oil? Who are who?
Well, I'm not sure I want to use the word defend, but just the reality that I think everybody's receptive to change. And, we're a product-driven society. In 200 years, we had nothing. We had no hospitals 200 years ago. We had no airports. We had no planes and ships. And so I think everybody that is in favor of, let's say, in favor of oil is really in favor of keeping the products moving, keeping the supply chain moving.
But do you see that the researchers and of course not now, but short-term researchers can find some kind of replacement for these products that we have today? Or not?
Armando, we've had 200 years to come up with that replacement. And, the person who comes up with that replacement is going to be a multi-trillionaire. And so, no, that's a big carrot. And there's been really no greater time for greater pressure to come up with that backup plan than the last, 10, 20 years. And nothing has been done.
So, one side we have policymakers, and we are talking about people that are, for instance, United States, taking care of the let's see, the regulatory systems and trying to impose renewables and things like that. And the other side, we have people that are more conservative. I could say, I don't know, it's real, but that see, like you see, some impossibilities to change everything.
Well, I'm not sure I want to call conservative is realistic. Is, like I say, that's a situation we have. And, 200 years ago, life was hard. It was short. People didn't live past 40 years of age. And today, it's because of all the products. And interestingly, everybody is they misuse the word energy because they keep talking about wind and solar energy. But Armando, wind and solar only generate electricity. They manufacture nothing for society. In fact, if you go back in history, electricity came after oil.
Okay.
Because, light bulb was discovered after oil because it's made with oil. Everything that needs electricity, be it the iPads, the computers, washing machines, whatever, it's all made with, the products from oil.
Being back to subsidies that we mentioned a little bit before, we know that we heard that renewables receive subsidies. The first point, do you know the size of this subsidies? And the other question, do oil and gas receive subsidies as well, and the same size, different size?
I believe oil and gas do receive subsidies, probably not as publicized as much as the wind and solar, because obviously you want to keep that infrastructure going because that's the backbone of our society. We got 8 billion people we're trying to keep alive on this earth, and you want to make sure that infrastructure is kept alive. What you're doing, you're starting a new infrastructure of wind and solar, and so the government subsidies are going to that. And they're huge. I mean, all these wind farms, all these solar farms, they're trying to provide incentives to build them. But the bottom line is, when you take a look at, the charts of available electricity, especially in the United States, we got this Arctic spell, which is covering half the country. And, when you got your solar panels covered with 5 feet of snow, they don't generate too much electricity. And the wind turbines aren't doing very much. And so it's, when you got, a need for reliable electricity to keep the house warm, you don't want to be dependent on wind turbines and solar panels.
You are happy today because California is not so cold like Texas today. It's 60 something.
Well, California, like I say, we don't allow negative temperatures here. No, it's a pretty temperate climate here. And we get, Lake Florida, we get a lot of sun and, but it's a strange situation that the politicians that set the policy, set the subsidies, and like I said, they're not trained engineers. And like I said, the most disappointing thing, as I mentioned, they will not participate in a conversation.
You mentioned something that took my attention. See this picture, Ronald, please. January 15th, Texas, the solar contribution this day was 0.
Yes.
Wind,
Yes.
6.5%. Natural gas plus coal, 85%. What do you see? How can you interpret this picture?
Well, you basically have a chart there of two different types of electrical systems. A couple of those, natural gas, coal, hydro, nuclear, they can generate electricity continuous uninterruptedly. And then you got solar and wind that never produce electricity continuously. So you're comparing apples and oranges. At that one point in time, that's what they're contributing. The next point in time, the numbers for natural gas and coal, they're going to keep generating, electricity, and wind and solar may contribute and they may not contribute.
Uh-huh. Mhm. Okay. Please let me share a very short video from Scott Tinker, something that I love this thoughts of this.
Bad, it's because of this. Above that red line, countries consume more.
Sorry, let me restart.
Asia emits more CO2 than the rest of the world combined now. And it's not because Asia's bad, it's because of this. Above that red line, countries consume more stuff than they produce, and below it they produce more. The United States makes 5 billion tons of CO2, but we still need more stuff. China makes 10 billion tons, but they make more stuff than they need. Most of the non-rich world, the non-OECD, are producers. The rich world, you and us, are consumers. We say, send us our stuff on an Amazon truck, one item at a time to the front door. And what are we effectively saying? Put out our CO2, use coal, so it'll be cheap, and just send it our way. Is this a zero emission strategy?
What do you think about that?
Well, I use the term leakage because California is a great example because we like to keep the California climate clean. And so anything that's a potential polluter, we get rid of it and send it offshore. But the problem is, California is the most environmentally controlled location in the world. If you manufacture anything, you want to do it here to keep emissions down. But instead, we send it over there, as the video said. And we're basically leaking emissions somewhere else. So instead of manufacturing it here, we manufacture over there where they have almost no environmental controls, no labor controls, and the emissions are greater. So world emissions are increasing with that philosophy. We keep the California borders clean, but anything outside the borders, California doesn't count that.
So you use a term that could be coined CO2 leakage.
Well, CO2 leakage and any kind of emissions. Like I say, we would basically have, it's okay for other countries to do the emissions as long as it's not here. We want to clean up our act here. And that's, like I say, it's great if you live in California, you get nice clean air, but the world is getting greater emissions. For example, we import more oil than any other state in the country. We used to import 5%, and over the years, in the last 50 years, it's grown 50 to 60%. And so all that oil being imported to supply the in-state refineries, because we won't drill in-state, is coming in from foreign countries by tankers that use a low-grade fuel. And the emissions from tankers, this is astounding, the emissions from tankers is double the entire mobile fleet of California. But that's okay, it's offshore. California doesn't breathe it.
Outside my
right.
outside my home.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But being back to the title of our program today, the agenda of this different energy world, let's see. So policymakers and Greta's similars, they are bad, or they do not understand enough this cause and consequence?
Well, I want to say they don't understand because they won't participate in the conversation. I'm 100% in favor of doing what they want, but the repercussions for, like Greta Thunberg, she wants to get rid of oil. Well, do you really want to get rid of all the hospitals? Do you really want to get rid of all the fertilizers and stop manufacturing tires and asphalt? I don't think she really wants to do that. She's so focused on emissions that Like say, and wind and solar is not going to replace it. Wind turbine solar panels can't make tires. They can't make asphalt. And yeah, it gets down to it's a totally misunderstanding of the word energy. They're just totally confused because they're comparing apples and oranges, just like the chart when you're comparing, how much electricity wind and solar generates versus the continuous electrical generation we have. You can't compare wind and solar to oil. They do different things. Wind and solar only generates electricity. Oil, now coal is used for electricity. Natural gas is used for electricity, power plants. But oil is almost never used for electricity. It's black tar. It's useless unless you're going to refine it into something usable. And now we have a product-driven society that grew from 1 to 8 billion in less than 200 years. And now the challenge we have now is we got 8 billion people on this planet we want to keep alive and well. You have a video?
No. Yes. No, sorry. It was an error. I apologize for that. Yeah. Please go ahead.
But that's the challenge we have is, if Greta gets her way, she's concerned that, pollution is going to, have climate change effects and, people might die. But how many people are going to die versus eliminating all the products in their lives? Because, I've written numerous times that you eliminate oil and you're going to get rid of a couple billion people.
Yeah.
Armando, we've mastered weather. All the weather-related deaths have been pretty much eliminated from cold and heat. And, we now have, fertilizer. We can grow vast amounts of food anywhere in the world. And we have all these ships and planes. We can move it to different countries that don't have the food there. And, now we have a delicate balance. We got 8 billion people and, they're going to die from malnutrition, starvation, diseases.
Exactly on these things that you are talking now, let me share something here.
For plastics, molecules for fertilizers, ammonia for fertilizers. The world needs both. We're not going to electrify everything.
Exactly what you are talking
about. 100% yes, because, wind turbine solar panels, they can't make fertilizers. They can't make pesticides. And we want to, control the growth of food around the world and increase the growth of food around the world. And if we increase it, then we need the ability to move it because, you grow it in one country, you might need it in a different country. So, we got, 50,000 merchant ships and 50,000 jets around the world moving products around. And like say, we have, the medical industry. We need that to keep these 8 billion people alive.
But how can we believe these people cannot understand? Because let's see the example of Al Gore, was vice president of the United States for 4 years, and he cannot understand those things?
He cannot understand it because, as I mentioned, he won't participate in the conversation. Again, I'm 100% in favor of what he wants to do if he had a backup plan. But with no backup plan,
but backup is expensive. You need to have the intermittent energies and more the old, let's see, energies, the formal.
Well, that's another thing. Because of the policies that John Kerry's proposing, only the wealthy countries can afford it. Mm-hmm. Because, like I say, there's 8 billion people in the world, and 80%, which is more than 6 billion people, they're living less than $10 a day. They can't subsidize themselves out of a paper bag. So it's only the wealthy countries that have this agenda, and it's really unfortunate that I would like to have a conversation with him because he wants to get rid of oil. President Biden wants to get rid of oil. Governor Newsom here in California wants to get rid of oil. Mm-hmm. But do they really want to get rid of tires and asphalt and fertilizers and hospitals and airports? I joke that the best thing about getting rid of oil is you ground Air Force One. It'll never fly.
Let me share another short video from Scott Tinker. He's a geologist.
Yes.
Let me show here.
In this real world, there are real trade-offs. We've got to end this divisive binary narrative. Black and white, clean and dirty, believer denier doesn't exist in the real world.
It's something related to what you are.
Exactly, right. It doesn't exist in the real world because it, a conversation would bring it to the forefront. And I'm really in shock that the press doesn't ask these embarrassing questions. Because, Kerry wants to get rid of oil. Oh, well, great. If there's no backup plan, do you really want to stop making tires? You want EVs, but they need tires to run. and like I said, do you want to get rid of all the hospitals and all the medications that didn't exist 200 years ago? And like I say, the real world is just that. And the real world has got to be on conversations. My passion is energy literacy. And my passion is to get people energy literate enough where they can talk about it comfortably at the dinner table. Now, energy can get really complicated really quick with graphs and charts and all kinds of formulas. But the reality is, simplistically, all the products, that's what we're trying to maintain. The supply demand for the 8 billion people is products, not electricity. Because everything that needs electricity is made with oil. From computers and, all the stuff's in the hospitals. And it's, like I said, we got to have conversations. And if we had conversations and asked the embarrassing questions, I'm embarrassed that, President Joe Biden, he's flying around in his 400-ton airplane, and he's screaming in a microphone, we're going to get rid of oil. Well, what do you think's keeping that plane up in the air? And by the way, what do you think made that plane? And, does he really want to ground Air Force One and travel the country on horse and buggy?
Yeah, some important concept. Export CO2, leakage of CO2 is very important. Yeah, the absence of engineering, science. Talking about science, let me share another very, very interesting point from Scott. Video. So here. Sorry, 1 second only. Notification processing consumers. No, it's here. Yeah. Here.
Can live together, but if we remove doubt from science, it becomes religion.
Fantastic. So that's the point that you are trying to bring to us. We need to discuss and to see the understanding, because renewables can be an addition of energy. Do you believe on that?
Exactly. There's no silver bullet answers because oil's not going to provide everything. Wind and solar is not going to provide everything. It's going to take a lot of everything to make it work as efficiently as we can. The thing we got to focus on, Armando, is efficiencies and conservation. Nothing is going to last. Nothing's going to last forever. Right now, the religion is going to green. Well, there's not enough lithium and cobalt in the world to build enough batteries for that many EV cars and trucks. But the same type of thing. We have oil. Every country's got oil. Is there enough for the next million years? I don't think so. Of course, you and I aren't going to be around then. But we want to we don't want to throw it away just because we have it. And, the focus is on efficiencies and conservation. I remember when I had my first automobile back in the 60s, you open the hood and you could hide 2 of your buddies under the hood. There was just the engine. I drive a Mercedes now. I opened up the hood the other day. Armando, I can't fit a sandwich under the hood. There's so much emission controls that it's, like you say, we want to basically
This is the point you are mentioning as efficiency, but efficiency in terms of vehicles, but can you see in terms of energy themselves, energies, energy source and primary energy source, efficiency in these terms?
different things need different sources. Like I
Yes.
say, the growing industry needs, fertilizers and pesticides. They can't get that from wind and solar, so you're going to get that from, oil and natural gas. And the 50,000 merchant ships and 50,000, jets we have, they're not going to run on wind and solar. They're going to need, the fuel to run them. So you want to use it where you can. I know I've got a lot of friends. I say the EVs, the elites have bought them, and the elites will continue to buy them. But there's a limitation because the profile of the EV owner is highly educated people, usually 1 or 2 degrees, high income, multi-car families. They live in a house, so they can charge the car in the garage, low mileage requirements. And so, if they want to buy an EV, they park in the garage, and if they got a short trip, they use it and come back and just plug it back into the garage. The problem is, Armando, we're running out of elites because most people are not as highly educated as the elites, not high income, they're not multi-car families, and they don't live in a house. And so they're, apartment dwellers, single car owners, they need a workhorse vehicle. And right now, the electric vehicle has not proven to be a workhorse vehicle. It has, range anxiety, charges anxiety, the climate. Here in California, we have, I think, about 40% of all the EVs in the entire country. About 40% of them are here in California, temperate climate. And the next biggest state is Florida. I think we have 6 times more EVs in California than we do in Florida. But you're talking about 2 temperate states. The center of the country, which gets horrendous, winters, they're really not in favor of EVs. I saw a picture of a guy up in Alaska, minus 40 degrees, trying to charge his EV. In the half hour it takes to charge it, at least, he might die of frostbite.
And solar panels probably cannot receive sun in these days.
Exactly, right. Yeah, the change of the Earth orbit and everything, they function differently at different times of year. Yeah.
Yeah, the clouds. Tell me a little bit about temperature and the weather in the United States now. So Texas is suffering a very huge winter. How
yes.
are they let's see, fitting the grid to support this?
Are they trying to supply the grid? Because the last thing you want to do when you have continuous uninterruptible electricity generation. Now, hydro, you're not going to shut down hydro. Nuclear, the United States is shutting down a lot of nuclear. Internationally, they're building nuclear because they know that's zero emission electricity, and it's continuous and it's uninterruptible. It's got everything going for it. But the situation here in the United States is we want to go to more wind and solar, so we're shutting down coal-fired power plants, shutting down natural gas power plants, and that's a continuous electricity. So when we get into a crunch, like a weather-driven situation, like the frigid conditions that are occurring, wind and solar are not your backup plan.
Yeah, guys like President Biden, Al Gore, Greta's Granholm, they are in favor of nuclear or not?
No, they definitely don't want nuclear.
Don't want them.
Yeah, like I say, it's the same. They're not engineers, so they have the fear of the nuclear disasters, and since they can't put their hands around it, we're not going to do it. Wind and solar is much simpler, and maybe it's more simple for them to understand. And so
maybe a lack of engineering and science understanding.
Just layman's conversations. When I give presentations, I do not like to give a presentation because I don't want to talk about something the audience doesn't want to hear about. I want to have a fireside chat. And so I will share with the moderator of the event and with the audience, like 50 open-ended questions. do you want to talk about EVs, wind, solar, nuclear, whatever? And there's questions that will, most people are embarrassed to ask an intelligent question about energy. So I give them the questions and then they could, modify it, whatever. But there's got to be a conversation because, EVs, everybody wants to go to EVs, but EV is 100% made with oil. And the tires are made with oil. So you get rid of oil, you get rid of the tires, you get rid of the EVs. You get rid of oil, you also get rid of wind and solar because everything that makes wind generate electricity and solar powered electricity is made with oil. So, that's a conversation. You don't want to get rid of oil because with no backup plan, you're going back to the 1800s.
But you said something very special. Wind and solar are very simple solutions. The equipment is visible equipment. So nuclear is something complex, and the time to install and to operate, you need special people, trained people, is something different. So that
right.
maybe
The
that's
politicians, it's too complicated for politicians to understand it. If you've ever seen the diagrams of refineries, politicians can't understand that. So if it's too complicated, they don't want it. A wind turbine, they can see it spinning, and it's very simple.
they do not want to take risks.
It's not risk because I think they're taking a big
Personal
risk.
risk in the decision. No risk
no.
of nuclear. No.
No, it's not a risk. They just don't understand it because the situation is you either have continuous electricity or you don't. Now, do you want continuous electricity? If you do, you really can't put all your eggs in the wind and solar basket. You gotta support something that's providing continuous electricity.
Very good. But in this side of the agenda, policymakers and press, you mentioned press, are they being paid to promote these things? Because they do not understand nothing about this.
I guess the only story I can share with you is in the UK, the king and queen, they have a lot of press. They have all these parties, and they invite everybody to the parties, and the press talks very good about them. But if the press asks them an embarrassing question that they have a difficult time answering, they may not be invited to the next party. So it's you almost got to play the game.
I
And
wanted to be invited for the next party. Good. This is the press definition.
but you take a look at professors have to do research papers, and they can apply for grant money or funds to do research. Now, if they apply for research through these policymakers that the world's coming to an end because of all these emissions, they get funded. If they apply for a grant to say that wind and solar is going to basically ruin our way of life, they don't get funded. And so it's like I say, it's playing the game, but everything starts from the top down. And our leaders are providing, I think, the wrong direction. That's why that article was written in the America Out Loud, that they're basically changing our way of life. And this green energy, it's not green energy, it's only green electricity. And electricity provides nothing to 8 billion people.
So the only solution you see, I know that the conversation is something, a topic that but the only solution you see is because you cannot move this direction. So the investments on the renewables will keep growing, and subsidies are growing. So what can be done?
Well, you're right. The subsidies are growing. The local communities, the not in my backyard, the NIMBYs, not in my backyard, are rejecting a lot of the wind and solar, farms because they don't want these ugly things in their backyard. And the fact that they don't work most of the time and they're not really providing much for humanity, it's not getting any public support. So they're increasing resistance, and it's got to come to a head sooner or later. And I think it'll be sooner than later. I'm just, the positive thing, Armando, I'm seeing a lot more people around the world talking about the same type things that I'm talking about, that Scott Tinker's talking about. And these articles are coming out in, Australia, South Africa, from their point of view, because, it's like I said, we need a solution, because without a backup plan, you can't just say, well, we're going to get rid of that. Well,
and you cannot stop investing in oil and gas still, because we need for a long time is irreplaceable at that time.
well, if you don't want to, use a gasoline-driven car because of it emits, well, you get rid of the car. Go back to the horse and buggy. But if you go back to the horse and buggy, now you need a shovel. And your range is not going to be as great. So there's a lot of, give and take. We want the flexibility. The airports have gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. The planes are getting bigger and bigger. The range, you can fly almost anywhere around the world, nonstop. And, we've gotten used to that. When you go, I always joke with people, we had a zero emission society back in the 1800s. There were no coal-fired power plants, no natural gas power plants, no nuclear power plants. Electricity didn't exist. Life was, I would say, simple, but it was hard. Yeah. And, people didn't live past 40 years of age. And but that was a zero emission society. And, when I talked about the 80% of the 8 billion people on this planet living on less than $10 a day, ironically, Armando, they don't need electricity because they got nothing to electrify. They don't have washers and dryers. They don't have iPads and, televisions. They're just trying to barely survive. And, they would like to join the Industrial Revolution, which they haven't done yet. But they've got no equipment that needs electricity. They've got no hospitals over there. So they got no X-ray machines. And
so let's see if the conclusion could be this one. We will survive with these different agendas, and there is no way, besides the conversation, as you said, but there is no other way to change this direction.
Well, that's, like I said, that's the multi-trillion-dollar question. If there is a substitute for oil, the situation is we have a product-driven society. And to keep the supply chain alive and well, to meet the demands of those 8 billion people, and the wealthy countries, we're enjoying everything. We got, communications and heating and ventilating, and we can go to restaurants anywhere, et cetera, et cetera. But in developing countries, they're trying to join us. And it's going to take a lot of effort, and the demand for products is going to increase. We have all iPhones, but most of the world doesn't have an iPhone. And if they do get an iPhone, then they'll need electricity to charge it.
Wow. That's it. Thank you so much, Professor Ronald Stein. Okay. I'm not so happy with the conclusions because society is going to a complicated position, I suppose.
It is complicated, but I see this is, I think this is going to be the year that I think conversations are going to take place, because, we're getting to the point of mandating EVs and imposing on the public that's not ready for it, and the ethical and moral obligations to mine for all those exotic minerals, leaking it to other countries. For example, we got a lot of lithium in the United States, but I don't think you're ever going to mine for it here in the United States. The environmentalists will be all over it. You can have labor laws you got to adhere to, and the cost of mining lithium here versus mining it in South America, it's going to be humongous to mine it here, which would drive up the cost of the EV, And Armando, you can't afford to drive up the cost of the EV. And so we have a situation that, yeah, there's a lot of people that don't want to give up their lifestyle. And I think they're starting to speak up. And it's become more and more expensive because you reduce the supply of oil and you're going to reduce the supply of your refineries. And so you have less products to meet a growing demand. Well, that's supply shortage, and that's inflationary.
And being made overseas.
Yes, yes. And shipping it here.
Yeah.
On
Yes.
polluting ships.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Big pollution. The ships are
Yes.
very pollution. That's
But
great.
I just want to have people focus on, when we talk about energy, let's not talk about energy. Let's talk about products or electricity. Because all the green energy that the globalists are focusing on is only for electricity. They're not concerned about the products that are keeping the 8 billion people alive. And so that's what we got to focus on. How are we going to maintain that product supply chain if we get rid of oil?
Yeah, that's right. Thank you so much. And keep your house above 60s,
In California, we don't allow minus temperatures.
like Texas, minus something.
That's right.
Have a great day.
Okay,
Thank
Armando,
you.
have a good one. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.